So I was just listening to an old episode of my own podcast, as one does. And I was thinking about how in the past I would so frequently sort of process my thoughts and issues out loud and kind of make them into the show. There are episodes that are about, they're about cover songs, but they're also about generational echoes and like the death of my grandfather. And I realized that during this year of isolation, in which a lot of people have done a lot of introspection, I felt like I have too, but I haven't been saying it out loud. I haven't been processing it that way. It doesn't have to be into a microphone necessarily, but, even just like over the phone with friends, I haven't been doing that. It's all been happening in my head. And I know from experience that things happening only in my head is bad. That's when bad things happen. When I keep those thoughts rattling around up there, they become new variants, It's not good. You gotta get them out. You gotta inoculate the thoughts. You gotta say them. You gotta talk about the issues that you're having, and you gotta air them out, and then you understand them better. I'm using the royal you, but it's me. I don't know that other people are really like that. I know that I am. I know that every thought I've ever had has seemed coherent in my head until I've said it out loud. And that's when the real ironing out happens, during the speaking aloud part. I assume that is sort of the trick behind therapy, right? Is that it's not really about anything other than getting a person talking. Okay, so I wanted to play a clip from an interview that I couldn't really use, and when you hear it, you'll be able to tell why. This is a guy named Brandon Hilty, and in this particular clip, he's talking about the death of his father.
My dad had a lot of years and years of health issues, a long history with a drug addiction. He was a cop for a long time, broke his back in the early 90s, and then has just had a long history with recovering, not recovering, et cetera, and it eventually got to the point we were working on getting him into an assisted living place. He wasn't necessarily old enough for it. He was probably he was 62, I think, so he wasn't quite old enough for it yet, but then once we were almost there, then we didn't hear from him for a couple days, and it was unfortunately time what we expected.
So the other thing that you heard was my mother-in-law reading a book to Arlo called Dr. DeSoto. It's one of his favorites. It's about this mouse dentist who feels a sort of Hippocratic obligation to help a fox with a sore tooth despite knowing that the fox plans to eat him. The mouse and his wife devise a pretty clever way of fulfilling their medical obligations while outfoxing the fox in the end. Here's the issue. I thought Brandon and I were each recording our end of the conversation, so I wasn't cautious enough with the Zoom mute button like I usually am. The Zoom audio was just the backup. But there was, in fact, a recording issue on Brandon's end, and, this Dr. DeSoto book goes on for a while, and then there are more books. So, I couldn't really use it at all. I have a hard time just abandoning interviews that I do for this show, though I have. One time I interviewed this statistician named Brian Gottlob after I had talked to the demographer Peter Francis. That was like season 4. Gottlob had some issues with Francis's methodology, and I thought it would be interesting to do a sort of counterpoint episode, but my interview with Francis ended up being less about his precise ideas and more about the way that thinking systemically about one issue helped me understand other issues and even personal problems. It was about the thinking, not the ideas, which turned out to be very clarifying and important to me, but also rendered the Brian Gottlob interview sort of useless. I mean, not entirely useless. It served a purpose in that it made the revised intent of this podcast clearer to me. And it was just a good conversation, and I learned some things, and he used my name a lot when explaining things, which I always think is really cool. Now that I move in a lot of LinkedIn sort of spaces, I see that people do that a lot, and I envy that skill. My conversation with Brandon was also a good one. It was our first, though we have followed each other online for like a decade. And what we did was, we pretty much just went month by month through Brandon's year in 2020. I don't know what I was planning. Maybe I'd talk to more people and do a sort of oral history of our individual trauma. Would that have been a good idea? Probably not. Okay, so have you watched any of the TV that's been taped in the last year and a half? From what I've seen, there's like a 50-50 ratio of shows that either address the pandemic or choose to ignore it. And I think, regardless of subject matter, the shows that chose to ignore it definitely made the wrong decision. I've seen a couple episodes of Chopped that were clearly taped fairly recently. I mean, you can't quite tell, but there are a lot of these disorienting close-ups that at first seem like just a new stylistic choice for Chopped, but start to feel, over time, more like just ways of obscuring certain safety measures that were put into place just out of frame. The chefs that are competing make reference to losing their restaurants, but they say it's because of the economic downturn that we're having. In that same weird way that they'll never say brand names on Chopped, you know? They're like, oh, I really love Irish marshmallow cereal, even though I had to eat a lot of it during this economic downturn that we're having. Which also killed my grandma. It's been a really bad economic downturn. There's something just so unnerving about it clearly being there but not talking about it. And for what reason, right? Timelessness? Escapism? That seems like such an absurd thing to strive for, adding another layer of irony to the already ridiculous term reality TV. I don't watch any of the current sitcoms like The Conners or Superstore, but I see from ads that they have directly incorporated it into their storylines, and it almost makes me want to watch them. I mean, not The Conners. But I'm fascinated by how we are talking and not talking about this, and how some shows seem to even be changing their minds out loud about whether or not they should. Like my favorite British architecture show, Grand Designs, which I've resorted to watching in bootleg form on YouTube, they seem to have belatedly figured out that they had to address it. The show always tracks progress of the houses with the months and years, and every time they hit March 2020, it feels like, did you ever see Requiem for a Dream, the way the names of the seasons land on screen? It feels like a jump scare, like the word winter on a black background has never been scarier. Anyway, at first, Grand Designs didn't quite acknowledge the pandemic. But there's one episode that takes place in like April of 2020 when a chronically ill woman is giving the host a tour of her house at obvious social distance, but the whole thing is so anxiety-inducing, I don't think I absorbed a single design detail. In later episodes, instead, the host starts interviewing the homeowners outdoors, then going in and touring the house by himself. It's much better. Now, the best acknowledgement of the pandemic that I have seen is the Apple TV show Mythic Quest, which has a near-perfect first season, followed by a Zoom-based pandemic special episode that is still more or less canonical and is really the peak of the format. Mythic Quest is a workplace sitcom in the best way, in that it really is about individual and group dynamics of a workplace. It's a little heightened, like every comedy is, but its core values are so rooted in real life that when it suddenly veers into moments of drama and pathos, it feels unexpected but totally earned. Anyway, their quarantine episode is a knockout. It captures both the novelty and weirdness of working from home and the crushing isolation of it in a scene that I don't really want to say anything about it, but it's the best and most creative thing that I've seen on TV in a long time. I also recently finished Bo Burnham's Inside. It took me a couple of days. There was no way I could have watched that in one sitting. Not just because of the barrage of, often deliberately irritating songs, but because it's so deeply fucking bleak. What it is it's a comedy special that Bo Burnham made by himself in one room of his house over the course of 2020 and into 2021. He makes wildly creative use of his space, and he writes some very clever and funny songs and has a slow motion breakdown. Right now, we seem determined to forget just how hard this pandemic really was, especially when, for so many and for so long, there was no hope of anything getting better. Inside, I think, really captures that darkness and hopelessness in a way that I think is really important and forces us to think about it again. Like it or not, we have to keep thinking about it and finding the right ways to talk about it. I want to start today's show just by saying that I'm experimenting with some different recording setups right now, trying different things. So if parts of the show sound a little different or a little weird, that's why. We're working through it. And what we're working through specifically is my longtime computer finally died after a miraculous 11 years of life. And that computer has been my most important artistic tool for these last 11 years. So much of the way that I make videos and edit and score and even just think about this podcast was determined by that machine and its many quirks. Using a 10-year-old computer takes a lot of compromise, but it had a lot of abilities and connectivity that modern computers just don't have anymore. I've been anticipating its death for a while, and I don't believe I've actually lost anything significant. I think the hard drive is okay anyway. I haven't actually cracked it open yet. I'm not ready to take that step. That's when it's real. And I just wanted to put out there that as this show adjusts to being created on different equipment, it'll change. That's the nature of working the way that I do. So bear with me as I find new ways forward. I think it'll be good. It had to happen eventually, and now it did. So today on the show is a conversation with Laurie Contrino, the development manager at 3S Art Space, which is the music venue, art gallery, and restaurant space in Portsmouth, New Hampshire. I'm a big fan of 3S. I think the last time I was there was probably October 2019 for the New Hampshire Film Festival. I know for sure the last concert I saw there was the Felice Brothers. I remember being a little worried about how they would do because they'd recently lost more than half of their band members. Everybody who wasn't a brother, in fact. But they walked on stage with their new members and they just ripped into this song of theirs. It's called Aerosol Ball. And it was like, if anybody in that audience wasn't a huge fan already, 30 seconds into that first song, they were in. It was just an absolute home run of a set opener. St. Paul at the Aerosol Ball. She's such a special girl. She's been around the world. She's such a precious thing. She's dancing to the king. Speaking of winning people over, Laurie is a new friend of mine. We first met via email through work, but we moved in similar circles and we figured we'd probably seen each other here or there somewhere. We had a lot of interests in common. One of them was my friend Dan, the subject of the last episode of this podcast. See, at 3S Art Space, they host this fashion competition that's called Project Upcycle, and Dan does a lot of video work for them. 2 or 3 years back, he produced a video piece that introduced this live fashion show that concludes Project Upcycle, and I did the voiceover work for that video. Explaining all of that to Laurie when we first met online, untangling the web of our lives and finding the intersections quickly, it's something that I got pretty good at in the pandemic, and I did with a lot of new friends and acquaintances. As you know, I'm not crazy about the word networking, but I suppose that is what I was doing. I was just finding the digital version of networking where I don't have to be out at some kind of event wearing a suit that doesn't really fit me, trying to find the nerve to just approach people and chat with them. I really have thrived in that aspect of my life in the pandemic. It leveled the playing field for me as a person who can't really take a lot of time away from my young family in the evenings, a person who doesn't have a lot of money, a person who's not great at in-person social norms but is pretty good at personable digital communication. And I find myself a little worried about all of that going away all of a sudden. I was doing great at it. And as I record this, mask mandates are dropping everywhere and in-person events are getting scheduled, and I'm not even fully vaccinated yet, and I feel pretty worried about the whole thing. I used to be an anxious extrovert, a person who did well in social situations when people make the first move. They see me and say hi to me and introduce me to someone, and who otherwise wilted like a flower and retreated as quickly as possible. In the year or so before the pandemic, I was finally getting away from that tendency. I was becoming the guy who grabs someone and introduces them to someone. But without practice, I'm worried that maybe I lost it again. All of this is to say that I met up with Laurie a few weeks ago. It was the first time we'd ever knowingly seen each other in person, and it was my first in-person podcast interview since March of 2020. No one has touched that microphone in a year, so don't worry about like germs or anything. I just pulled it out of a drawer because I haven't used it.
You saved it just for me all this time.
Yeah. We met at 3S Art Space in Portsmouth, and we'd intended to talk outside, but it was pretty windy, so we went into the empty venue and we sat on opposite sides of the stage with our masks on. Honestly, one of the cooler and weirder interview setups I've ever done, and I didn't even take a picture. I talk to a lot of people who run venues these days, and I'm always curious how they've been keeping busy and keeping the lights on. Figuratively, I mean, most of them obviously turned the actual lights off.
We did close our doors starting in March 2020 and opened back up and went virtual almost immediately with a exhibition that was about to go up in April, and just started troubleshooting and coming up with creative solutions, and we haven't stopped.
I need to thank 3S Art Space for getting me wise to the idea of the virtual gallery tour, because it's like this 3D modeled image of the gallery, and it's so cool because it's also like tricked out with all of the pop-up video information, and as soon as I saw it, I thought, do other art galleries? 3S Art Space, I guess we should say, is an art gallery, a performance space, and also like a restaurant space all in one building.
Correct.
So the gallery space is always very interesting, but it's not a huge gallery. So after I exhausted the resources of that virtual tour, I thought, do other museums do this? Do other art museums do this? And I went on this virtual tour safari of museums I've been to, museums I haven't been to, and it was just really interesting, especially I think to compare somewhere you've been with its digital counterpart.
So how did we do?
Great. It felt, I remembered what it was like to be in there. Usually before a show, I'm always get to a concert embarrassingly early kind of person. So I love, one of my favorite things about 3S Art Space and coming to shows here is that I don't need to stand around awkwardly in this empty room while the first opening act sets up. I can go hang out in that gallery and look like I came here super early on purpose.
Exactly.
Not just because I'm nervous about being a short guy who can't get great sightlines all the time. The gallery space at 3S has this big garage door that opens up, which incidentally made in-person gallery visits in summer 2020 a little more feasible for them. But it opens up out to this loading dock stage, where in previous years they'd held these free casual outdoor concerts. In 2020 and now in 2021, that looks a little different.
Before it was just show up with a blanket, a chair, super chill, no charge, just, maybe donation suggested kind of thing, but very, very laid back, and people just kind of ebbed and flowed out. We morphed it to, to control the area with social distancing, 10 tables, 40 max, and really kind of took our time to plan that, and it was a smashing success. I think that people felt they knew what to expect. They showed up, they were craving live music, so they felt safe, but they were able to still enjoy some live music outside. So we're super excited to kick it off again this year. We've expanded it to many more dates and for a 4-month span, so it's we're excited to get that rolling as well.
That's great. Yeah, I think about that, that this town has so many of those, just show up and see something kind of performances. I don't know when we're going to be able to get back to that.
Yep.
When does that come back? I have no idea. But then again, who knows about this part, right? I know firsthand from the New Hampshire Theater Project that music and theater venues have the hardest and weirdest road back from the pandemic. But the shape and the steepness of that hill is changing faster than I think anybody expected it to. This is like one of my favorite spaces in town.
Oh, thank you. I love that.
I remember getting so excited when 3S Art Space was like the Capitol campaign was going on and they were building it. I used to live on State Street, and we would drive by all the time and see it being built. And I was like, I can't wait to see what that's going to be.
How cool.
And then for the last however many years it's been since 3S Art Space existed, I'm reliably here like 3 or 4 times a year. So yeah, I really miss it, and I am excited to return to it.
Oh, thank you. I miss it. I mean, we as a staff too miss it. I miss this room that we're in. So many concerts.
Yeah.
Memorable, joyful, incredible concerts in this space. So thankful that we still have the gallery up and running. So thankful for Loading Dock about to kick off. I cannot wait to get in the space to just a good old-fashioned concert.
I know. I love concerts. I love stages. I love performance rooms. I love like gear,
Same.
I now, but this is the thing. It's been so long that I'm like nostalgic for even the bad stuff now. Like I'm thinking about like when I was here one time, I saw this band Titus Andronicus, and this girl like attacked me. Like it was a very calm show because although Titus Andronicus is a very rowdy band, their singer is very discouraging of like anything that would make people feel unsafe.
Okay, that's good.
So I've been to several shows where he has like stopped to admonish people about their behavior, which is not totally uncharacteristic for a punk show, but like it still feels very novel. But anyway, I don't know. This younger woman like set her sights on me as just like a target, like a
you
like
do
a,
look a little
like,
sketchy,
yeah,
Zach.
like a soft person she could push around. And it was like the weirdest thing because it was like she went from 0 to 60 in terms of like aggression,
What did she do to you?
She kind of just like charged at me and shoved me. And
I'm not laughing. I'm so sorry.
I feel like it might have happened multiple times too. Like I don't remember because it's like you kind of get that slight. When something like that happens to you, your brain kind of goes onto like anxiety autopilot, And so then you're like afterwards, you're like, did I exaggerate that or was it worse than I? For me, a lot of time it's worse than I thought it was.
Okay, well, that's
because
okay.
I tend to think I did something, or I tend to like excuse a lot of behavior. So, only later will someone say to me like, I can't believe you like barely reacted when that happened.
Because that was over the top when that girl attacked you at 3S.
But I miss that, I want to get back to it. I want to get back to getting attacked by random people.
Oh, well, I would like to say the same, but I'm looking to a lot of things, but not to get attacked.
Yeah, sure.
But I am, like, it's funny. This room just, strangely enough, like, packed with people. I'm looking forward, when we're all, ready and vaccinated and it's all safe and everything, that shared experience is one thing about this room. I kind of feel the same way at the Paradise in Boston of like it just has the same vibe to me of like you feel like you are part of the show, not witnessing it. You're actually part of it. I'm so looking forward to that. But we're going to inch towards that capacity, looking more towards the fall of some indoor stuff and see where everyone's comfort level is, whether it be performers or audience, our staff. Safety is always of utmost importance to us, and that will always be our default.
Yeah.
But I'm someone that loves to be packed in a room. I'm probably not the normal average person these days.
I wonder how that'll be.
Yeah.
Because it's very context dependent whether or not I like to be in a crowd.
Yeah.
I do not feel uncomfortable in places like on the T or anything like that. I'm very used to that.
Yep.
Sometimes it's like if we're all trying to like get somewhere or like we're like trying to get a table at a restaurant or something like that, then it's more like the circumstances of why you're standing in a crowd can be like a little, but my hope and my feeling is that when I do get back to that, I'm probably gonna like really appreciate it. You know?
Yeah.
You can do a lot of like looking around at other people standing around impatiently and being like, "Look at us, man!
Look at us waiting in queue. Isn't this awesome?"
But I actually didn't get together with Laurie to talk about 3S Art Space, at least not specifically through the lens of the pandemic. I was thinking of something else. I can see from LinkedIn that Laurie's been very vocal and active about diversity, equity, and inclusion. In the year since George Floyd's murder, businesses and nonprofits have been having a lot of these conversations, often very publicly. Have they really helped? We started by talking about Culture Keepers, Culture Makers, which is a discussion series about issues like race and accessibility that 3S prepared back before the pandemic, back before George Floyd, and has only just now launched as a hybrid in-person and virtual event. And they waited for a very specific reason. They felt like they needed to put people in a room together.
What happens in a natural flow of an in-person conversation is a little different than what happens maybe on a Zoom conversation or a telephone or texting or emailing. We all know that when you get together in person, it blooms into a more natural flowing conversation. So
it's interesting because I think about those events. I've been to some of those kind of events, and it's funny because a place like Portsmouth is a pretty progressive-minded community, but you have these variations within the kind of prevailing opinions, and sometimes it's just someone with like a very particular axe to grind, right? Like they had some really weird interaction 15 years ago and they never stopped thinking about it, and the way that they talk about diversity and equity and inclusion is totally informed by that one weird thing.
mm-hmm.
And I feel like a lot of those conversations, the community conversations, they get like hijacked by that kind of thing. But again, this is one of those things that I'm kind of nostalgic for, because what happens in the room, right, is when some guy's at the microphone and he's going off about something, and it's like you sort of get what he's saying, but at the same time you definitely disagree, and there's like about 50% of it you don't understand at all. You look at the people around you, and the people that are reacting the same way that you are reacting are like your people.
Mm-hmm.
And then when there's a break, you talk to that person and you're like, what's going on with that guy, right? And then like something really happens, you know? I mean, I'm almost certain I told this story before, but basically an entire season or more of this podcast and several friendships was born out of a single Community Connectors meeting at the New Hampshire Theater Project, when a discussion about affordable housing was lightly hijacked by a guy complaining about loss of property value. By the way, I have since become the chair of the New Hampshire Theater Project's programming committee, and as things get back to some version of normal, programming those events will be an area of specific focus for me. Just wanted to throw that in there because I'm pretty excited about it. So you've done like quite a few of these like DE&I trainings and stuff over the past year. It seems
I
like there's been a lot of them.
I haven't done a bunch, but I have done a few.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, some like online stuff. One wonderful, the music hall was so lovely, and they had written a grant and got a grant for a education series, and they invited all the arts organizations in town to take part. So I did go to that a few weeks ago, and it was
I was there too.
Well, you were?
Yeah.
I didn't. Okay, where were you?
I was kind of sitting in like the middle of the room. I was kind of sitting in the middle of the room.
I was like in like the second row center because I'm like a geek and I do that all the time.
That's funny.
That in-person training, by the way, was maybe 40 or 50 people spread out around an 800-seat theater, which is why it felt like a perfect opportunity to start wading back into, the notion of crowds. But even still, with all that distance, I sat there just like humming with so much anxiety. In a minute, I'm going to help Laurie remember something from that training, and I was shocked that I could even remember that much.
Yeah.
But I thought that was so lovely. And again, I think people are afraid sometimes of saying the wrong thing, using the wrong terminology, offending. And I think that's that kind of conversation, and hopefully what we're bringing with Culture Keepers, Culture Makers, is a safe space to talk. And you don't have to say everything perfect, and you don't have to understand everything. Everyone is at a different place, personally, where they are in their self-exploration. So there's no mistakes. There's only, there was what did they say? There was that one slide, Zach, that was about it was intent. Do you remember that? It was acknowledging what you're saying, even though your intent isn't to offend, acknowledging that it could offend anyway.
Yeah, I remember that. It's like understanding intent but acknowledging impact or something.
There you go. Exactly. Bingo.
Yeah.
I thought that was the winner takeaway for me, and I think that just says it all. And I think that alleviates of, come to the table, have conversations that you might not be comfortable or well versed in or whatever, but you want to be on the journey of educating yourself and being part of the solution. I think the fear of doing it wrong prevents a lot of people. So I thought that was a brilliant thing to open that with is, just you might not say something right and you might offend someone, but just if you acknowledge the impact, it becomes a safer space.
It's very interesting to me, actually, because I feel like my interpretation of that, well, not interpretation, because I understood what it was meant to do, but for me, it actually almost had the opposite effect, because I'm not really afraid of saying the wrong thing, because I feel like my intention is very clear. Mm-hmm. So I feel like when I'm talking to people, I mean, one thing that I will tend to do just as out of habit is that I become absurdly personal very fast, So I feel like people always know that I'm coming from a place of goodwill,
Yeah.
and I tend to rely on that.
That girl at the punk show, I don't know if she got that from you.
That's true, but I guess it's because I was just standing there. I wasn't talking, But yeah, the acknowledging impact or the understanding impact or whatever it was, that part to me, I was like, oh, that's true, right? I should be careful about what I say, because even though I have this thing where I'm like, oh, I can just kind of coast on the fact that I obviously mean well, that doesn't mean I can't hurt people.
Right.
And that has definitely informed the way that I've communicated since.
Yeah, for sure. And I've learned too, as well as, my self-education journey on DEI and whatnot was just understanding that a lot of things that I used to say in the past were offensive or just kind of ignorant to the impact or, and not for any other reason, but just, not being exposed to another story or how it impacts other people. Just like this awareness of things that seemed fairly benign to me weren't benign to someone else. And I think that's such an important part of this step.
You think about those things that you say, right? Like little things. I remember, so my boss actually sent around this email one time about different phrases and cliches that are used that have sort of racist origins that people were not aware of. And one of them was long time no see. So long time no see has origins in kind of mocking Chinese American railroad workers. And so it's interesting, right? What are the odds that when you say something like that, a person would be aware of its racist origins, right? And it kind of became a great example of that kind of thinking. Oh, well, it's harmless, or it's who even knows that, right? But you don't know. You don't know about how your actions and your words contribute to a larger sense, I guess.
Yeah.
And the odds that you're going to offend someone by saying long time no see are vanishingly low. But it should serve not as... You shouldn't hear that and think, oh, well, that's how everything is, right? Everything's offensive for some reason. The reaction should be wow, so much of what I do and say was built under these racist auspices, and I don't even know about most of it,
Yep.
And that's kind of the, I don't know, that was a bigger takeaway for me too, was this idea that just because you mean well or you don't mean any offense and you're not necessarily offending anyone doesn't mean that you are acting with full awareness of what you're doing. Mm-hmm. I think everybody wants to think they're hyper aware of everything they're doing and everything they do is with intention. Every movement that they make is precise and, and they're not flailing around. But just keeping that kind of stuff in mind, it's what's the thing about the most important, what's the Plato thing, right? Plato said that he's wise because he's not wise.
Yeah.
I think about that all the time. Being aware that you don't really know anything is the most important thing.
Oh,
and
it's so
being reminded of that as often as possible.
Absolutely. And I think people with, that human nature of pride or whatever it is, it's hard for humans to admit when they're wrong. It's hard for humans to admit that they hurt someone. It's hard it's a hard thing, but once you do it, and it's actually quite empowering to you, the people that you're around. And I mean, even with parenting, I always thought, from a different generation of, you were a kid and you did what your parents said, and you didn't have an opinion or XYZ. And I don't know, I've tried to realize as I've grown older that I am a flawed human, and I certainly don't parent perfectly ever. And if I do say something that's inappropriate or just not a reaction that I thought was, modeling good behavior, I would admit it to my children. And I'd be like, I'm sorry, that was not right of me to say that, or, not a good reaction or whatever. I don't know. And you just model that for the next generation of like, you don't have to be right all the time. You don't have to know everything about everything,
Yeah. In the spirit of admitting mistakes, I think it's technically Socrates who said that, not Plato. To be honest, most of the time when I think about that quote, I'm not thinking about them anyway. I'm thinking about the song Knowledge by Operation Ivy. The thing with kids is funny because it's like, on the one hand, everything that I learn now and everything that I can like model behavior-wise and everything, I think is going to have a huge impact on my children. I think about the way that my parents talked to me about race and racism and how that got into my body so early. This idea that there was this idea of racism and how terrible it was and how flawed it was to think that way about other people. And it feels like something I always knew. And I think I remember having conversations with my mother where she would really stress the importance of that. So that's a big deal, right? Because that guided me through my life to now. And now I have the opportunity to do the same thing for my sons. But it is just like a chain of white people. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And so when I think about the diversity and the equity and the inclusion conversations that have been happening, I have been seeing increasingly diverse faces in those Zoom calls, which means a couple of different things, right? It means that the organizations that are paying for people to go to these are maybe doing a better and more concentrated job looking for diverse candidates. It means the people that are organizing these things are doing a better job finding those people and those voices. Like you'll see somebody I'll talk to somebody in a breakout room at a Zoom DE&I thing, right? And I'll be like, oh, this person's really interesting, and I really like their perspective. I don't necessarily do anything with that information, but at the next DE&I thing that I go to, they're one of the panelists. And it's like, okay, so somebody noticed, right?
Nice.
And I suppose that makes sense, right? Because if I were planning a DE&I, I know exactly who I would talk to, like now because of these meetings.
Yep.
But do you think about whether or not it's adding up to anything? Are you like, is this adding up to anything? And part of the problem is like, can you tell yet? Because we're still in a pandemic.
Yeah. I think it's just, I love the phrase, start where we're at, and a lot of times we're like, well, we're not far enough, or we're not here, or let's just show up every day and start where we're at, whether it be with our work, with our kids, with our interaction with general society, and just, and try to walk the walk and take something that you learned from one of those DEI sessions and one of those nuggets of like, wow, that really made a light bulb go out, off in my head of like, that kind of clicked something, it connected something, and I'll go home and I'll share it with my children, or I'll share it with friends or family or whatnot. And I think it's going to take a long time. It took us it's always been like this. I was just going to say it's taken us a long time to get here, but we've always been here in the United States in this place.
This is a point that I'm pretty sure we'll be revisiting in this and other conversations coming up on the show, but I just wanted to highlight it here. The way that Laurie is seeing progress, but also not seeing progress. She mentions starting where we're at, but, when it comes to racial justice, how long are we going to be starting? There's a part of me that's so frustrated by that, the slow march forward. And there's a wiser part of me that recognizes that the march forward is cumulative. And so different pieces are always starting all the time.
And with each generation, I think that focusing on the children is just huge right now. I think there's still hope for our generation and all that good stuff. A lot of things, even education, what people learned, what my mom learned in school is different than I learned in school, is different than my daughter's going to learn in school, and so on and so on. I think it's going to take a while, but we're on a path that I really don't see us going backward and going back to what we were doing. I really feel like this year, very much so, was a turning point for us as a society. It's not a light switch, and it's going to take a long time. But every day, just showing up and doing the work.
And the world has been on pause. I have been aware of that even as I've been busy, starting a new job from home, having young children who are absolutely not on pause in any way. The world around me has been on pause. And I think one thing I'm trying to assess in this conversation with Laurie is, during this pause, we have talked and talked and talked. But will we remember anything that we learned? The mask stuff is related, honestly. I really wanted to see the end of mask mandates as a sign of progress, but it felt more like impatience. It has this eerie air of reversion to it. And I feel that in the way that mass shootings have come roaring back too. I don't want to think this way. I want to be optimistic. I want to be eager to jump back into crowds and get back to getting better at being in them. But I'm out of step with the prevailing sentiment right now, and I can't pretend that I'm not. I think, getting my first shot was kind of a moving experience for me. Seeing our government mobilize to help us, seeing people in uniform wielding iPads and syringes instead of weapons, it was really powerful. And it did a lot to heal a wound that I hadn't even been aware was there. I think I've been under the impression or delusion that I was mostly spared the trauma of 2020, that I made it through unscathed, but I'm starting to see that I was wrong about that. Laurie was good to talk to for alleviating some of that feeling, though, because I've been thinking about all this stuff at the same time. I see it as all connected. So her positive view of the impact of these DE&I conversations made me feel better about everything.
Even the, conservative trolls, right, have adopted the language of diversity, equity, and inclusion. When they make all their horrible jokes about, gender and, they're using the words that and it's like, you learned that somewhere, and I feel like that even makes a difference. I feel like even the trolls, we have dragged the trolls further into the light.
There you go.
Because they have to, they're where we were, and
yeah.
So I think that's a good sign, I guess. It's interesting to think about a place like 3S Art Space and its role, because obviously music, performance, culture, it's so important because it is us. It's our society reflected back at us, and so by booking diverse acts and having diverse, artists occupy the gallery space.
Yep.
And all that stuff. And even having Barrio out there with, teaching people how great it is to marinate beef in Coca-Cola. That's important, right?
Barrio is the Mexican restaurant that's currently in 3S's restaurant space. They have really good tacos, and they will also hold a very special place in my heart forever, because the bar at Barrio is where my friend Laurie Waltz-Gagnon told me that I'd been selected by my class to speak at Leadership Seacoast graduation, which was a genuinely shocking moment for me that has gone on to really define a huge part of the last 2 years of my life. I think Barrio is still open in some fashion right now. That's a place that if they don't pull out of this pandemic nosedive, I will be truly devastated.
You're part of a larger ecosystem, right? Like the arts ecosystem and the music ecosystem. And I don't know what the budget is for booking artists, but there's a band of space where you guys are, you're not booking U2.
No.
That'd be cool. But then there's a kind of like an upper threshold, and it's also kind of a lower threshold too, because it's like the people that are gonna sell tickets. I
Mm-hmm.
mean, I've been to stuff here where like local bands have played too, and that's fun. Although the audience is just the local bands and me.
And you.
Yeah. So, but you know, like you get 10 or 15 bands. A lot of bands these days have like 7, 8 kids in them. That, you know, that's a lot of people eventually.
Absolutely.
The trick is just getting them to stay in here and watch each other's bands instead of just standing outside smoking. You know, that's me being like the dad of the band. You know, all these like 20-year-old kids. I want to be like, go in there and support your friends.
Yeah, exactly.
They're playing
I'm
great
like
ti-
the parent in the
Yeah.
room at shows. It's so I'm like, whatever. If I have to school you people, I will.
But so I guess what I was thinking was that like there's only so much that you can do as one piece of the equation, right? You can try to seek these acts that are diverse and representative, but that doesn't mean that there's a lot of those acts out there at the level where you can find them, where people will come to see them. And it's interesting to think, I don't know, I'm kind of rambling here, but do you think about that sometimes, about the way a venue can or cannot?
Yeah, I mean, I definitely think, certainly through this last year, I think we've all, whether it was on our radar before or not, realized that the arts are, supply connection, communication, comfort. They're a way of us expressing what we're feeling, what we're thinking, what we're going through, whatnot. And Richard, it was amazing, again, before the pandemic and whatnot, Richard Haynes, which is the artist that is doing Culture Keepers, Culture Makers coming up, he said something, and it really resonated with me, the power of art and culture on that voice of, he's like, back when, all these amazing artists came out and, James Brown was shimmying around and saying loud and proud, I'm black and I'm loud and proud, and wearing a big afro, and all of a sudden everyone was, going, it changes culture's lens into, and it's a conduit to rising up and sharing and celebrating one's culture, and it's interesting because this is going to see, we are an arts organization, so this program is exploring topics of race and equity through an arts and culture lens that is very specific. So they're going to come and talk with our local community, and then 10 people that are taking part in all the 4 talks are going to take part in an art workshop, and they're going to translate what they have gotten from these conversations into artwork, and then it's going to be displayed publicly in our lobby gallery. So again, it's a language basically of kind of taking a temperature on where the community is, and then reflecting it in artwork, and then sharing it with other people, and they see what they see in it. So
That's interesting. Yeah.
It's powerful. It's a
Yeah.
powerful way of communication that people can relate to.
I like that because art is already oftentimes sort of like a reflection of what we're thinking. Sometimes it's what we were thinking, sometimes it's what we're going to think. But so to kind of like reverse that equation, like have the conversation, create the art, create additional conversation. It's like it kind of like you're like multiplying the power of art's ability to like spark discussion.
Yep.
So that's cool. I like that a lot.
Yeah, looking forward to it a lot. I can't wait, as we've all been waiting for this for quite a long time.
That's it for today's episode of The Last Podcast. If you have questions or comments, reach out. I'm Zach Little, ZACLITTLE on Instagram, and that's generally the best place to find me. Especially reach out if you have any experience recovering hard drives from old iMacs. Thank you to Laurie Contrino for talking to me, and thank you to you all for listening to it and listening to me work my way through my feelings about the likely end of the pandemic in America. I really am looking forward to it. I think the mask should be the last thing to go, not the first, right? Whatever. I'll adjust. To pay your respects to my old computer, I guess the best way is to go watch some of my old videos at youtube.com/angryfilmsproduction. Making those videos was always really a 50-50 partnership with that computer. Next time on the show, old friend of the podcast, Robert Sapiro, will be back to talk about how talking about topics like race can shift to action,
and maybe the ways in which talk is action.